And welcome to LSE, welcome to an evening of Spike. Now, for those of you who may not be aware, launching my next book's in June the 29th of this year. So this is the first of our launch events. I've got a great guest, a very good friend of ours at the Inspired Leaders Network, Patrick Jubb, who, with many, many hats on, one of his hats is Chief Marketing Officer at Crystal Palace Football Club. So let's just start with, this is part of the strengths-based revolution. Western developed societies have become absolutely fixated, if not obsessed, with everyone's weaknesses. And those of you who work in organizations will know from day one the performance appraisal. And it's all about, it tends to go something like this. Hi René, really good to be having a chat. Here are the 2 or 3 things you are so good at. Can we just park those? And now, can we just climb into, and when I started, if you're my vintage, in the 80s, they were your weaknesses. In the 90s, they were your areas for improvement. In the noughties, they were areas for development. And today, they're your limitations. Whatever they are, and however many you have, the next hour of the conversation is all about the things you're not so good at. And it tends to end with, here's your performance improvement plan or performance development plan. Let's focus on all the things you're not so good at. So you're going to spend the next 12 months focusing on all the things you're rubbish at, don't like, and you'll probably get them at best to mediocrity. And the whole organization is doing the same thing. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we just turned that on its head? And we said the performance appraisal went something more like, here are the 3 or 4 things you're fantastic at. How do we as an organization benefit from capitalizing upon your strengths? Spike is your standout inherent strength. Every one of you in this room has a standout superpower. Not a learned skill, something inherent inside of you that we were given as a blessing from birth. We see it with sportsmen and singers. They develop their spikes into something special. Most of us have it suppressed from the first day we walk into education. Mums know everyone's spikes. Mum knows what all their kids are great at. As soon as you get into school, as soon as you get into the office, it all changes. And what we're seeing currently is this, what I'm calling FUD, fear, uncertainty and doubt. We saw it at Brexit. We saw it with the French elections at the weekend. We saw it with Trump. We see it everywhere. That we're not voting for something that we want, we're voting for the least worst, the least scary. That can't be the way forward. And I'd like to say that the philosophy of Spike is what works against this. What do we see first? Where does our unconscious bias take us? I wonder, in a world of Spike, if we saw what people were brilliant at first, could we change our world for the better? And I put it to you, we can. And with that as our backdrop, please give a warm welcome to our special guest today, Patrick Jubb, who for the purposes of tonight is going to be the Chief Marketing Officer of Crystal Palace Football Club. Please give him a warm welcome. Patrick, come and join me. So given what you just heard, give me an instant reflection.
Instant reflection, potential is the word that keeps coming to my mind.
Very good.
Yeah.
So you walk into the doors of Crystal Palace Football Club for the first time. What potential did you see?
First, the potential of the brand. And brand is not a word you're allowed to use in a football club, nor customer. You're not allowed to use the word customer either. They're a club and a fan. But fundamentally, to us, they are brands and their customers. I remember having a chat with Steve, the chairman, about a year before, saying that how I didn't understand how football clubs worked from a brand and marketing point of view, because their fortunes pretty much live and die by the performance of their product alone. Mm-hmm. And you, even with a powerhouse like Manchester United, if they don't perform, you see fans around the world drift. And I didn't understand that. That if you actually created a brand of a club that had a deeper connection to its fan base than just winning or losing, like Apple might say for its fan base, surely it would have a greater chance of success long term.
What was going to happen now that he's employed engaged you?
Well, I mean, Steve's, without telling his story too much, because he's much better at that than I, but Steve's been a fan of Palace since he was 4. So here is a man who has had a great career, run a very successful business, and in 2010, managed to, with 3 other fans, genuine fans of the club, buy the club and save the club they loved and had loved since they were kids. So, from my point of view, again, as a marketeer, yes. I kind of start to see potential. You start to see a compelling story and a truth to this club that's different to a lot of the corporate clubs like your own that exist out in the Premier League.
So, in terms of assets in a spike, what were the positives? What were the strengths that you saw that perhaps you could energise, mobilise, or bring to life?
I mean, firstly is, and it was absolutely, firstly it was the potential of the brand and what the core truths of the brand were, particularly in relation to the other 19 clubs in the Premier League.
So give me a flavour.
Well, there was a movement there where a lot of fans were getting a little bit tired of corporate clubs and getting a little bit tired of what you might describe as the money and fame gods that were driving the Premier League. And, in a club like Palace, you actually had a club who weren't driven by those things. They were actually driven by more of the roots of their South London heritage. They are much more an anti-corporate club. They don't believe that you need to change yourself in order to succeed.
How do you grow something like that where unconditional love you can't explain? It's normally where you're born or where your dad took you to. Or how do you grow that globally or grow connections to that and try and replicate the unconditional love?
So that's then the other next stage of the journey. So the next stage of the journey is how do you harness this proximity, as I best describe it, and allow that to grow the future of the club. And I think the heart to that, the cornerstone to it, is the fan base, is the community. Because if the community feels like it does, on a Saturday afternoon, like a community, their voice and their exchanges become incredibly powerful. They actually become your marketing. Actually, fans are as interested, if not more interested, in every aspect and facet of the club and all the dimensions of it and what they do outside and beyond the pitch as they are for the 90 minutes.
Because we've loved them.
Absolutely right, absolutely right. And if you put a spotlight on that and editorialise that, become a media channel in your own right and share that, not just with the core community, but with football communities around all the regions of the world, then you're on to something really exciting. So, case in point, very large financial company, it's a retail company. They are, an online platform, and they provide lots of guidance and an exchange for investing, buying shares, ISAs, and such. So I asked the CEO, so what is the most important hour of the week for consumption of your brand? Sunday morning. Why is that? Well, it's the only time I think people get a moment to breathe, to stop, to look at potential opportunities. Okay, what are you doing on a Sunday morning? What's your team doing on a Sunday morning? What have you provisioned to serve or served or have ready to go? We don't. I'm in bed reading the paper on a Sunday morning. You kind of go, if you aren't totally synced to the way your consumers live and consume, you are completely distant. It's very hard to market if you don't have that proximity.
And you don't understand it, you don't live it, you don't serve it.
That's right. I mean, my team, the team at the club, pretty much on shifts we work, definitely work 7 days a week, roughly just under 12 hours a day. We've got a responsibility to our fans to keep them as close to the club as we possibly can. They give everything. I mean everything, as you well know as a fan. You give way more than money to the club, and without them, we wouldn't have success. But as a brand, either a domestic national brand or a global brand, we have a responsibility to also try and do good and put good back into the community and put good, harness football for good. So we've just recently launched the Palace for Life Foundation, where we are putting using football as a platform and all of our assets as a Premier League football club to help young South Londoners find a better path in life. I genuinely believe that in the future, a good percentage of the brands we want to consume will operate to do good in society and in communities, not just to make products and make money. And we'll actually, as consumers, be more discerning about the brands that we want to be with, based upon how genuinely good they are, and they act, not just saying it, but doing it.
I was made in China, and in China, our president is actually a big fan of football.
Yes.
So nowadays, all the Chinese companies and they are trying to look at all kinds of opportunities, especially to collaborate with UK. And I remember in your speech, you mentioned there is a big focus about the international strategy, how to attract international fans, for the club. So I wonder if you can share some exciting story or successful case studies for us.
Yes, I mean
Thank you.
Yeah, yes, we have a number of markets, including China, that we have on our radar, and there's a number of criteria that we've chosen to select certain markets. We are not the biggest club in terms of resources by any stretch. Last year, one of our primary markets is the US. And there's a number of reasons, again, why we chose the US as a market to go for. And last year, we held a US tour, which was 3 games. And, it's nothing really new. Clubs do it all the time in the closed season. But I think what we always try and do is something to connect our values and our sentiment as a South London club to the way in which we bring those to life. A good example of that is when we went to South Africa. We were the only club of a number of Premier League clubs that ran a programme to find a young up-and-coming talent to come to our academy and actually have a proper training programme at our academy. Because we always think about wanting to do more than just the other 19 will do, to showcase who we are and our values.
Hi, it's Ruth Lau. So my question is not about football. My question is about Larry.
Please.
I'd love to know more Larrys. Where are they?
They're around. Now, here's the truth. When we talk about management is the firm thing. It's, they say if you don't measure, you can't manage. We measure management. Management is where we normally get to the top of the organisation. Management tends to mean rank. Leadership doesn't. Leaders aren't necessarily at the top of the organisation. I believe every organisation has more than enough leaders that they need, but they're not necessarily at the top. And if I was to get everyone in the room to close their eyes and think of that person in their team that if they had mission critical, it needs to be done today, who would you give it to? You're starting to define your leaders. And you don't normally give it to the most senior person, you give it to the person that's going to do it. And I would say if you looked around your organisation and say who's got the most influence and persuasion skills that people will follow, they're not necessarily at the top of the organisation.
What innovative and disruptive strategies do you have in place?
I don't know whether or not we have strategies. I think our strategy is to disrupt. We've come into the Premier League market, we've thought about it in a different way, we've kind of looked at the truth of the brand and the club. and found that it's got a distinct voice in the Premier League and kind of gone, wow, okay, that's not being mined by anybody. There was a macro trend there that kind of was creating a tension where we could comfortably slot in. So at this moment in time, I think we are mining the strategy of being the disruptor in the Premier League. And yes, you've got a...
Looking back over those three things, what have you found to be kind of the one thing or top things that are fundamentally true and are the same, irrespective of the completely different nature of those businesses?
It's very simple, is that there is a truth of either Vodafone, Land Rover or Crystal Palace, that has the potential to grow its fan base. Let's call it a fan base. And it just needs it to reshape itself to tap into that. And finding that is the key. So moving Vodafone out of Make the Most of Now into Power to You, to save it from recession or a recession in, kind of vulnerable consumer base, moving Land Rover to be relevant in the modern world of SUV, not being 4x4, allowed it to go as a global brand, and to tap into, yes, a core loyal fan base at Palace, but who had this shared sentiment about what success actually really meant. I think it's always trying to find the truth.
We've had a good time. It's been fantastic talking to you. I leave you with the message. Everyone in this room has standout inherent strengths. The Americans used to call them superpowers. These aren't things you train and working on. It's there within you. Please, 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 take a copy of the book, have a read. You can dip in, dip out, and get it to connect with you. The reason we're holding tonight is we're looking for ambassadors and advocates. Those people who have found their spikes, and like Patrick, when we have another one of our sessions, if you want to come and share the story of your journey of discovery for your spikes, this is the place for you. Please join me in giving Patrick a fantastic round of applause, and give yourself a round of applause for being a great audience as well.